So a great problem we often face when working with arpeggios is moving on from starting from the root. Going back some time for myself, I learned tons of licks from this book without any real knowledge of what was going on harmonically. And for me, a key component of a lot of good jazz lines is efficient moves or voice leading, so moving to close notes. Rather than making big jumps, say, you're playing G7, you start on a G, then the next chord C, and you jump to the note C. Sometimes referred to as root bias. And in this video, I want to share with you 3 things you can do to avoid this: stick, fall, or climb. And to illustrate this, let's just take the 2-5-1 in C, as it's probably one most people will know. First thing we need to do away with is the need to play the whole of the arpeggio, like D minor 7, G7, C major 7. And what I just played there, that's not what you want to be playing over backing tracks, maybe as a start point. It's something you need to know, it's something you need to be able to do very easily, but it's not something you want to apply musically in the sense of that's a solo. That is really just knowing your notes and the chords and finding them on the fretboard. We then have to work ways to create interesting melodies with those. And if I just go like this, that does sound this chord progression, but in a very obviously exercise and boring way. For my stick, fall, or climb to work, you need to know the notes in these chords. Hopefully that's not 5, 8, 7, 5, 5, 4, 7, 6. Hopefully that is D minor 7 is D, F, A, C. G7 is G, B, D, F. And C major 7 is C, E, G, B. So let's stick first. The whole premise of this is making close and efficient moves as the chord changes. And you can't get more efficient than sticking. And this is when you know that a chord tone is shared between 2 chords when they change. So if we look at the pool of notes in the 3 chords in the 2-5-1 in C, if we look at D minor 7 to G, we could keep the F, we could keep the D as well. If we look at G7 to C major 7, we could keep the G, we could keep the B. So let's hear what some of those sound like. So let's stick the same note on the D minor and the G. So we're going to use F on both of those chords, and then for the C chord, I'm going to go to the nearest note of that chord, which is an E. Another common tone between D minor and G is D, so let's try that this time. Then down to a C for the C chord. I could stay on the D, for the C chord as well. This time, let's find the common tones between G7 and C. Let's go with a G. So we're going to go F on the D minor, then up to G for G7, then stay on G for C. So we can stick with that note across the change between G and C. We could also use the B in the same way. Let's start on an A this time for the D minor. So A, and then B, and then we could stay on the B for the C major 7. Here's climbing D, F, G. Climbing up to an F, up to a G. And here's another climb. We're going to go A, B, C. So A is the 5th of D minor, B is the 3rd of G, C is obviously the root of C. We could start on the note C, so the 7th of D minor, go up to a D, the 5th of G, and up to E. Here's the first 4, so let's start on C, the 7th of D, go down to a B, so we're falling to the B, and we can stay on the B because it's a chord tone of C major 7. So let's mix up sticking and falling and climbing, so let's do F, G, G, which would be climbing from F to G, and then sticking on G. Minor 3rd, up to the root, sticking on that note, becomes the 5th of the next chord. And this time, let's try falling and then climbing. So we're going to start on a C, which is the 7th D minor 7, falling to G the 3rd, and back up. So that's the 7th, falling to the 3rd of G, and then back to the C for the root of C. Let's start on an A this time, and we could go down, we could fall to a G, but let's go up to a B, the 3rd of G. So A, the 5th of D, up to a B, and then we could stay on B, which is the 7th of C. And what this does, instead of having hundreds of licks from this book, what you can end up doing is creating your own licks. So I could be like, right, if I'm going to go F, F, E, which is stick, stick 4, I could be like... I know it's a simple line, but it follows the chords easily. You can hear da, and And again, work on hearing everything. Let's try another one. I'll go F, G, G this time. So that's going climb, stick. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, very simple melodic line. I much prefer something I can understand and I can hear, rather than maybe something that sounds maybe better than what I just played, but then I don't understand it, or it's quite complicated and difficult to learn because it's some fancy sort of Charlie Parker lick, which I'm not saying don't learn those things, but you know, you want to be able to create your own lines, not just regurgitating someone else's. Obviously, what I just played is technically incredibly basic. It's very simple. But if your experience is anything like mine and many others with arpeggios, then you learn them, but then you don't know how to use them, or you can't use them musically, or you can't make them flow, or you have that problem of root bias, which can be hard to really unlearn. It can be a really bad habit. We're still engaging and working with arpeggios, but we're working with them in a much simpler way. You kind of need that overarching, you know, can you play a D-7 arpeggio on the fretboard very easily? Yes. Okay, great. Now move on, let's make some music with that, and let's start by doing these really simple one-note ideas, which leads to hearing more, and that's the key thing. It's very easy to waste tons of time on the guitar by just practicing arpeggios, and if you can play them up and down and you're technically sound with it, and you can play them at a, you know, relatively good speed, you can find them easily, and then you need to move on from that. The idea of this whole thing is work with less but hear more. Hear and feel the pulls of either sticking, staying where you are, climbing up to the next note of the next chord, or falling to the note of the next chord. The arpeggio shapes themselves are really useful for mapping out the fretboard and in terms of building up technique. They're not that much use for making music unless you deconstruct them. Now, if some of the topics in today's video brings up some questions, I've got a couple of videos that could help you out with some of the topics. And that is my video on the pivot, the kind of Barry Harris style arpeggio, and also 24 ways with one arpeggio, just to sort of broaden your horizons with these sort of very important things to know. And that's what arpeggios are. They're important things to know, but they're difficult to apply musically unless you practice them in creative ways. And I know some of you will find what I've suggested today incredibly simple, but I promise you it has a payoff in terms of hearing more and taking you down a path to much more musical playing, rather than playing someone else's licks or just playing arpeggios up and down. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today. Until next time, you take care.